today's video, I'm going to talk about why you haven't retired because of this one retirement lie. You know, after years of being a financial planner, I've realized that so many people are unnecessarily delaying retirement because of this false belief. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about what this belief is. I'm going to break down why it's false, and then I'm going to tell you what you should be doing instead. And finally, I'm going to show you a real-world client example from someone who fell for this lie, and I'll show you what we were able to do so that they were able to retire without any doubts. So let's get started. There's an approach in retirement planning that uses a Monte Carlo simulation to come up with a probability of success for your retirement plan. It's a widely used approach, and I'm going to say the vast majority of financial planners use Monte Carlo simulation. Basically, the simulation takes all of your plan inputs, so that's expenses, income, expected investment returns, healthcare costs, everything you can think of that goes into a retirement plan. And then it randomizes the investment returns over and over. Maybe it's 1,000 times, maybe it's 10,000 times. And what it does is it spits out this probability of success, which is basically the percentage of scenarios where a retiree's savings last as long as they're needed, through whatever you put in as your, desired end of plan. So basically it reflects the range of potential outcomes. The problem that I've discovered over the years is that this probability of success figure leads to a ton of confusion, and it causes a lot of people to delay retiring unnecessarily. So way too many people think that they can only retire if they have a really high Monte Carlo score, like 100%. And they usually think that anything less than this means that they're going to run out of money in retirement. So what's going on here? Right? Why are people pushing themselves to get such a high Monte Carlo score? Well, when I sat down to prep for this video, I could think of a few reasons, and some of these are backed by research on retirement planning and Monte Carlo specifically, so we're going to go over these issues. Number one, it's, people have a deep-seated fear of running out of money, right? And a lot of people, maybe for evolutionary reasons, really worry about scarcity, right? So it causes people to kind of strive for certainty even when it might be completely unrealistic. The second problem, I think, is in a large part driven by the financial planning industry itself. And there's two problems, I think, with the financial planning industry and how they approach Monte Carlo. The first one is just a lot of planners tend to be, pretty conservative, nerdy accounting type personalities, meaning, they're pretty risk averse. And look, I've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, and I know, the whole boiler room mentality also exists out there, but those people don't tend to focus on financial planning. They're more of the stockbroker type dudes. So, but the vast majority of financial planners that I know, at least, a lot of them are pretty conservative, and I think this is causing them to push their clients to wait to retire until they have a really, really high Monte Carlo score. The second problem is a lot of financial planners, they might have a really good grasp of tax laws and estate planning and just, retirement planning in general. But the issue is that most of the planning community lacks a sort of rigorous understanding of statistics, right? Most financial planners have never taken a graduate level course in statistics. And if you look at what I think is the gold standard designation for financial planning, which is the CFP designation, the CFP designation, when it comes to statistics, it's a total joke. The curriculum that is based on that is just so rudimentary. It's not really doing anybody any favors. Contrast that with the CFA designation, where they really do spend a lot of time on statistics, and it's much more rigorous than what you would get with the CFP. And a lot of financial planners, they just don't pursue the CFA designation because it's entirely focused on investing. And even contrast that, like I said, with what you would get at graduate school. So the result is that a lot of financial planners, they might be pressuring their clients to be more conservative than they really should be. Related to that topic is the fact that the population at large also, they lack a background in statistics. And so this is also compounding the problem, and it's just going to simply lead to a lot of confusion. Now, understand that I want you to be completely ready for retirement before making such a big transition. So if you're worried about your retirement success rate, click the first link in the description to fill out a questionnaire. After, I'll send you a personalized video with step-by-step instructions to help you retire on time. Now, back to our video. So when you think about this confusion around Monte Carlo and the lack of understanding about probability, it kind of leads to several problems. So I'm going to show you guys this fantastic article in the Retirement Management Journal a few years ago about Monte Carlo. And I think the author does a fantastic job of explaining the issue. And so I'm going to throw some quotes up here on the screen right now. In his article, he talks about how Monte Carlo is an ineffective tool that wastes resources and distracts most investors from the essence of the problem, right? He goes on to say exactly what we just talked about. Most people lack the numeric skills to accurately assess probability. And I highlighted there, including experts, which is very, very true, right? And so, you've got these wildly inaccurate predictions of how long a retiree savings are actually going to last. And it's really the opposite of what they want. And, he calls for eliminating it from conversations, which I think is great advice. In my own practice, we literally spend about 1 minute talking about Monte Carlo, why the score doesn't really matter, and then we move on to the big picture, things that really do matter. Now, let's talk about what you should know about Monte Carlo, because you are probably going to come across this at some point. And so having a better understanding of what it really means is going to help you a lot, I hope. So there's a great article on kitces.com from their lead researcher, a guy named Derek Tharp, who really puts out what I think a lot of great research on retirement planning. And he had an article titled "Why 50% Probability of Success is Actually a Viable Monte Carlo Retirement Projection." And we're going to talk about a lot of the insights that he had in that article. So first of all, he goes on to note a 90% probability of success isn't a 10% chance of running out of money. Okay? It's actually a 10% chance that some adjustment may be needed in the future, right? It might be a small adjustment like cutting discretionary spending, and that might be all that's needed. It doesn't mean that you actually have a real 10% chance of failing. He argues that even a 50% Monte Carlo score is enough if you're willing to make modest spending changes when needed. And then these guys went on and did the research to kind of prove that out. And one thing to note is that you should think carefully about what that 50% result actually implies. Because it doesn't really tell you anything about how severe failure actually is. And he uses a fantastic example where he says, okay, look, if 90% of a client's desired income comes from guaranteed sources like Social Security and a pension, then failure is really just capped at a 10% cut in your client's income, right? Because if the rest of it is from guaranteed sources, there really is a bottom there. But Monte Carlo just completely misses that context. And clients, of course, they're not going to understand that. Another thing to note is that if you only had one opportunity to set your spending level at the beginning of retirement and you could make no adjustments moving forward, then yes, of course, you would want to have the highest Monte Carlo possible, like 95 to 100%, because you couldn't make any changes in the future. But the reality is everybody's able to adjust as they go along, right? And therefore, having such a high score really doesn't make any sense. So what they did in their study to look at what using lower probability of success in Monte Carlo looks like throughout somebody's lifetime, they went back, They used historical data going back to 1871, so using real market returns. And then what they did was they continually adjusted to maintain a constant either 95% success, 70%, 50%, or 20% probability of success throughout retirement lifetime. And what they found is that the adjustments that they needed to make based on, somebody with a 20% or 50% versus, 95% were very incremental. And it really did get them through retirement successfully as long as they had these positive probabilities of success. What their research indicates is that the big difference between the high and the low levels of probability of success is going to be the ending wealth level. So basically what happens is it becomes a trade-off between income and legacy. And so what this means is the people with the really high probability of success on Monte Carlo going into retirement, they ended up having huge portfolios. Well in excess of what they needed for legacy. The people that might have had like 20% or something like that, they ended up after, a 30 or 40 year retirement having very low levels of assets remaining. But their income was pretty steady and comparable to the people that had the 95%, probability of success. So what we want to do is just think about this in terms of the trade-off. And the trade-off is really in terms of income versus legacy. So a higher probability of success means you're going to spend less than you really could, and you're going to preserve assets for later. That's really what you're doing. A lower probability of success is going to allow for higher spending early on, but that means you're going to have to make adjustments as necessary. The reality is that retirees who will accept flexibility in their spending are going to enjoy higher lifetime income, and they'll still be able to maintain fiscal stability. This is why in my practice we use something called guardrails, and we use risk-based guardrails. And so we're able to dynamically change how much a client spends given whatever is happening around them. And then we don't have to sit there and focus on one static score. Now that you know 100% Monte Carlo score is an unrealistic number to strive for, I'm going to show you how to actually use this score to measure your retirement readiness. So I'll walk you through a real client example so you can use the same tactics to help you retire on time. All right, so this client, the husband, when he came to me, was 65. The wife, she's a fair bit younger, definitely robbing the cradle a little there. No judgment here, but that does kind of throw a wrench into your retirement planning because you really do have to plan for two, much longer lives than you normally would if people are closer in age. But in any event, they had plenty of assets, $2.6 million portfolio. And so what happened was a few years back, they had gone to another planner. And side note here, it's kind of funny. The guy gives them a 125-page financial plan with all of these crazy flow charts and, filled with all this financial jargon. And so, look, if there's any younger viewers on here, my advice to you is don't give anybody a 125-page report for anything, unless maybe you work at McKinsey. The only practical value to something like that in the real world might be as a weapon, I guess. But anyway, I digress. So the point was, these guys were obsessed with the Monte Carlo score on that report. And so when they came to me a few years later, in their mind, it was, okay, we need to do a retirement plan, but our score needs to be 100% for Monte Carlo. So of course, I put their retirement plan together, and honestly, they're in really good shape. These guys had plenty of room for extra travel. They had the ability to spend $20,000 a year in extra travel for the next 10 years, and then we ratcheted that down to $12,000 a year. So plenty of discretionary spending on their part. They also have an extra $1,000 a month just for discretionary spending. Their general expenses are relatively low. So you can see the Monte Carlo probability of success. If If you look at the right side, under the current plan is 85%, which in general is great. Of course, these guys are really fixated on that number and they're worried that it's not high enough. So what I wanted to do was pivot the conversation from focusing on having 100% Monte Carlo score to showing them the adjustments we can make if, as they go along in the future, maybe their portfolio values become lower and so on. And I'll show them how easy it is to kind of increase that Monte Carlo score by doing things that they can completely control. So the first just minor change that I made was showing them, okay, you guys have this retirement discretionary spending fund. It's $1,000 a month. Guess what? All we need to do is just cut that back by $250 a month, and all of a sudden your probability of success jumps up to 87% just from that one tiny change. And think about that. I mean, that's literally, especially these days, probably going out to eat twice a month, you're going to spend $250. So that's something that almost anybody could cut back on. The second change I showed them that we could make if it really came down to it and their portfolio doesn't perform or whatever the case is the travel reduction. All we had to do is go in there and reduce the extra travel from 8 years to 10 years. And then look, now all of a sudden we're at a 90% probability of success. And, these guys get it, right? If we go into some kind of a depression or whatever, you're not going to book the fancy trip to Europe that year. Maybe you're going to go to Yellowstone or something like that instead. And they get it. And most people are able to cut back on these types of things. So what I really want to do is just pivot their thinking from just being rigid, like this plan is set and we're not going to be able to change it, to, okay, we're going to dynamically update this. And so that gets back into our guardrail conversation. And so you can look at their guardrail report here and go, okay, great. Right now, you've got roughly $2.6 million. If things keep going well, there's going to be a time that I come to you and say, hey, you should be spending more, and we will actually increase your spending. If, however, tomorrow we hit a pretty major bear market, well, that's going to reduce your spending, right? So the baseline monthly safe spending here was $8,800, almost $8,900 a month. Guess what? If the market has, a pretty severe correction, you're going to have to cut back to $8,200 a month for the time being. And then once you get back up to a safe withdrawal rate again, we're going to increase your spending. And so really it just comes down to reframing the conversation and making sure that you're adaptable and not focusing on something that's completely arbitrary, like a Monte Carlo number. So by doing this, they're both able to get the confidence to retire and stop obsessing over this stupid number. Now they'll still be able to have the time, hopefully over the next 10 years, to spend it together while they're healthy and both retired. And they have confidence that their funds are going to last. And if things really change, they know that all they're going to have to do is adapt some of their lifestyle at some point, but it isn't going to be drastic. So now you know. Getting 100% Monte Carlo score isn't necessary, and it definitely shouldn't be the thing that keeps you from retiring. A successful retirement doesn't depend on your Monte Carlo score. It's about having a plan that's flexible enough to handle whatever comes your way. And look, if you're still unsure where you stand, I put together a quick questionnaire that will show you exactly where you are in your retirement readiness. Once you fill it out, I'll send you a personalized video breaking down your results, and I'll show you what you might need to do to adjust. Just click the link in the description to get started. Thanks for watching.